Well, Iranian leader Mahmoud Ahmadinejad now in Latin America, and it has some in the West worried about what he's up to, worried that he's making new friends, forming a new group that doesn't like America. This as Timothy Geithner takes a trip to China to talk about U.S. sanctions with Iran. And to figure out what this all means, lawyer and author Eva Gollinger joins us now from New York. Hi, Eva. So Ahmadinejad, he's in Latin America now. And this much to the dismay of the West. What is the worry?
Well, a lot of the worry is really just hype, and it's what we've been hearing out of Washington now for some time in terms of, Washington classifying Iran as a threat against the United States, but also classifying countries in Latin America, such as Venezuela, Cuba, for now over 50 years, as some kind of a threat to U.S. security, something that honestly has never been proven and frankly is just not true. We also have to remember that Iran and Venezuela particularly have had a very long-term relationship. They're both founding members of OPEC, of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, and they have a relationship of over 50 years. So this isn't something that's just happened overnight, and it certainly is not some kind of alliance that's being formed to somehow threaten the United States or prepare some plan of attack against the United States. These are legitimate relationships taking place. This is happening in Latin America with other countries such as China, such as Russia as well, where Latin American nations are reaching out beyond just the U.S., which has been their principal trade partner now for a century, basically, and are finding new partners that are willing to diversify the type of trade, share technology, and engage in a much more respectful relationship. And so, obviously it causes alarm to Washington because Iran is an adversary, a declared open adversary. But in reality, this is not a threat to the U.S. security. It may be a threat to U.S. influence and domination in the region.
So you think that this is being blown out of proportion? His visit over there is really not such a big deal.
It's really not such a big deal. I mean, first of all, he's participating in assisting the inauguration of President Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua. They've had bilateral meetings. He was in Venezuela yesterday, meeting with President Hugo Chavez. They signed some new agreements. They're consolidating different agreements, accords in areas of technology, of factories where they've been building cars, automobiles, bicycles. I mean, really benign things if you look at it in the bigger picture. Milk factories, agricultural production, housing construction. I mean, these are not things that in any way present any kind of a threat to U.S. security or to U.S. interests really in the region. And on top of that, I mean, there's no question that we can ignore or should ignore what has been the rhetoric out of all sides. I mean, certainly there's a lot of hype and rhetoric around Iran's relationship in Latin America, and there's no question that these countries, such as Venezuela and Cuba, Nicaragua, and even Ecuador, that Ahmadinejad is visiting on this trip, are countries that don't share very friendly policies and relations with the United States, at least today. And so that adds into what has been the exaggeration of the visit of Ahmadinejad. It also comes at a time when, of course, the tensions between the United States and Iran are at an all-time high. And so there's no question that adds sort of fire to this whole situation or crisis, as some would say, that's taking place between Iran and the United States. But in the end, I mean, it's not a visit that in any way is going to accelerate some kind of plan of attack against the United States that doesn't exist in the first place. And it certainly is not something that's going to harm U.S. interests in the region.
Amid all this, the State Department has ordered a Venezuelan diplomat based in Miami to leave the country. What is behind this?
Well, some would say that this could be some type of reaction or sort of consequence that the U.S. has now imposed on Venezuela as a result of its growing ties with Iran and, of course, being the welcoming nation to Ahmadinejad, the first country that he visited on this Latin American tour. The consul of Venezuela in Miami, Livia Costa Noguera, was allegedly declared persona non grata, expelled from the United States by the Department of State based on a report that came out of Spanish language station Univision a couple weeks ago, in which there was an alleged plot that hasn't been substantiated by any kind of evidence besides that presented in the documentary, which was basically rumors, hearsay, and recordings that have not been verified or corroborated by any kind of independent evidence, trying to accuse the Venezuelan consul, along with the Iranian government and the Cuban government, of some kind of terror plot against the United States to attack its nuclear infrastructure, which is something that it has been called outrageous by the Venezuelan government, by the Iranian government as well, by the Cuban government as well, but that there's been no solid proof. It seems like just one of these sort of blown up allegations against a nation that the United States would like to be able to justify some type of aggression against, because they'd like to be able to somehow implement regime change, and that is the case in Venezuela. We know that Washington has been actively involved in aiding the anti-Chavez opposition in Venezuela and trying to find ways, to isolate President Chavez in the international arena, which have been actions that have failed over the past few years. But this is another example of the growing tensions between Washington and Caracas, and it's evidence, of course, that things aren't going to get better this year, as some may have speculated or hoped, and that this is an electoral year in both countries. Both countries have presidential elections. Venezuela has now become a hot topic in both the Republican debates as well as now on the Democratic side, and so we're seeing, that this may come out to play even more so over the next few months in the United States as the campaign develops further and as there's a more sort of outcry from the extreme right wing, particularly Congress members out of Florida, to take harsher actions against Venezuela. But again, none of those allegations have been substantiated by any kind of real evidence, and it seems to be just a type of action taken against Venezuela because Chavez decided to meet with Ahmadinejad, and Obama, frankly, just doesn't like that.
Eva, thank you so much. Pleasure to have you on the show as always. That was lawyer and author Eva Gollinger.